And now, the Eagle Leadership Award presentation. We are so pleased that United States Senator Catherine Cortez Masto was able to return from Washington to be with us today. Like Governor Sandoval, she is a former Attorney General of Nevada. She was Chief of Staff to Governor Bob Miller when I first had the privilege of working with her at the White House. Already, Senator Cortez is hard at work advocating for the issues that matter most to Nevadans, like women and children, health care, and immigration reform. Please welcome the Honorable Catherine Cortez Masto, who will deliver a tribute to our honoree.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. This is just incredible to see all of the incredible faces in this room, new faces, friendly faces, people that I've known forever. And I get the opportunity, first of all, to thank you for recognizing my father on the Latino Leadership Network. It's fantastic for my family and I, my mother and my sister, to still have the ability to go out there and have people talking incredible things about what my father did in this community, in this state, so thank you. But there's another individual who I think just as highly of, and I've known him, my goodness, since my days in working for Governor Miller. I had the opportunity to get to know a young and the first Latino in the legislature at that time, a young Brian Sandoval, who was a state legislator, and had the opportunity to work with him. I was lobbying on behalf of Governor Sandoval. He was a legislator then, and the one thing I knew was that he had an open door. You had an issue. He was always there to talk with you, reason it out, figure out what's in the best interests of this state. And that's something that Brian stood for. He had high values and principles, and he carried those with him through the halls of the legislature. And it was exciting for me to see throughout the years as he went on to do incredible things on behalf of the state of Nevada, chairing the Gaming Commission, then becoming a federal judge on our federal bench, which, as many of us know, if you're an attorney and you got an opportunity to appear before Judge Sandoval, you knew he was going to treat you with respect. He was going to look at all venues of the law and the equities of the law and give everybody an opportunity to make their case before him, and his decisions were reasoned and well-reasoned. And then I got the opportunity to watch as he went on to do something that is, if you're on the federal bench for a lifetime, not many judges leave the federal bench. But for one reason, and that was his reason, because he believed there was more that he could do on behalf of the state of Nevada, our great state. So he took that chance, stepped off the bench, gave up that appointment, and said, I'm going to run for governor. And went out throughout the state, and I watched him because I was campaigning at the same time as Attorney General. All of the counties that we have, all the small communities, large urban areas, watched him as he spent his time talking to people about why he felt it was important at that time to run for governor and stand up for the issues that people cared about throughout this state, everywhere around the state. And he won. And I was privileged to be able to be the Attorney General and his attorney when he became governor, and to work with him on some incredible issues that were impacting Nevada at the time. But I want to say one thing that many of you don't know, that we are still beneficiaries of, and I still work on in the United States Senate, that Brian Sandoval, as our governor, took on. What he saw was the future and the opportunities here in Nevada. And what he saw was the ability to make others recognize that if you decided to relocate here your business and bring your family here, the economic benefits of coming to Nevada were incrementally fortuitous for you and your business down the road. And so he gathered everybody in the state of Nevada, from our private sector to our system of higher education and our businesses, and said, we've got to focus on economic development for the state of Nevada. We've got to think about our future. There's one other person I know that worked hard to do that, and that was my father. And what Brian did was recognize that not only do we support and love our gaming and our tourism industry and our mining, but there's other opportunities for us here in Nevada. And if we just take the time to work together and we have a vision and we're strategic about it, we can achieve that. I am here to tell you, Brian achieved that. What he has done to develop our state and promote economic benefits and opportunities to others to come here and for those that are here to grow and expand is tremendous. And because of his hard work, I've had the opportunity now in the United States Senate while I'm sitting on commerce or banking or Senate finance and even energy and natural resources to dovetail on all of the hard work that Brian Sandoval has done on behalf of the state of Nevada. So I am so honored to be able to present with him, along with the Latino Leadership Network, the Eagle Leadership Award to our governor, Governor Brian Sandoval. I can't think of another person who doesn't deserve this.
We'll stand over here so we can get a little better picture, Governor. We'll put you right here in the middle. On behalf of the Latino Leaders Network, it is my honor to present you, Governor, with our Eagle Leadership Award for your outstanding contribution to our community, the state of Nevada, and our country. Congratulations. Thank you. Beautiful. You're the son of Ron Sandoval, an FAA maintenance supervisor. Boy, we've heard a lot about the FAA recently. And Gloria Gallegos, a legal secretary, born in Reddington, California, on August 5th, 1963. Yeah. As a longtime resident of Reno, you graduated from Bishop Manoke High School and from the University of Nevada. You served on the staff of U.S. Senator Paul Laxalt and served as extern to the Ohio Supreme Court, later earning your law degree from the Ohio State University and passing the bar exam in Nevada, in California, and in the District of Columbia. I'm going to reposition this just a little bit. I feel like I got my back to a whole lot of folks here.
Maybe I'll scoot back.
Yeah. Hope I don't fall off this.
Got to anchor with one arm.
It would
one
not.
leg there.
It would not be good. Yeah. Can you make that down a little bit? Okay. You served as an assembly member, attorney general, federal judge, and governor of Nevada. So, a few questions. What was your life like in the early years growing up? Tell us about your parents, siblings, role models. Tell us about your early life.
Of course, and first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity and honor to be here, Mickey. I'm really overwhelmed. Senator, thank you for the kind introduction. I have such a profound respect for your father, and he welcomed me into his office when I was a candidate and gave me advice and was supportive of me, and I never forgot that. And people don't know we've been friends since my days at our days at the university, and so I have a profound appreciation, respect for the senator and what she has done for our great state. Thank you. And before I respond, and I'm not filibustering here, I also wanted to acknowledge my wonderful wife, the former NFL Nevada First Lady, Laurelyn Sandoval. And thank you all for being here. And there are a lot of friends and familiar faces here, and I truly want to give you my thanks for the support through the years. We all love this great state of Nevada. You know, to get to my parents, and I'm proud to talk about my parents, Ron and Gloria Sandoval. They're both native New Mexicans. My mom was the daughter of my grandfather, Eddie Gallegos, who was a proud World War II veteran, and his wife, my grandma, Marianne Gallegos, who was a housewife. My dad was one of 10 children. And had he not been one of those 10, one of the only 10 to move out of state, I would be a multi-generational New Mexican. But he made that decision. But we moved around a lot when I was a young kid. We had moved I was born in Redding, and from there we went to Salt Lake, and from there we went to Los Angeles, and from Los Angeles we went to Fallon, Nevada. And my mom still tells that story because she went to Fallon sight unseen from Los Angeles, and quite a difference between Los Angeles, California, and Fallon, Nevada. But two of the most amazing people that you would ever meet. I mean, they really taught me the value of hard work, of respect, and respecting everybody. And if you have the opportunity to help others, you do it. They both taught me a work ethic unlike any other. A lot of people don't know this about me, but when I was a kid, we raised sheep out in Sparks, Nevada, which was, a great. I guess at the time I didn't think it was a great way to grow up. My first job, and I've told this joke, and I apologize, but it's kind of true. My first job was cleaning sheep pens. And then I said it was good practice for what I did in politics, but but in any event, we had to get up, my brother and I, that was our job. And that's how I put myself through college. It's how I bought my first car. It's how I learned about the value of a business, because we kept our sheep, we sheared them ourselves, we sold the wool, we sold the lambs, and with that money, we got to keep it. We bought our grain and we bought our hay. But we had to be up really early in the morning to get all that done. My brother and I. My brother is now a veterinarian in Sparks, Nevada, and does an incredible job. And I also have an older sister, Lori, who works for a nonprofit in Reno, Nevada. My parents are still with us, and I'm very blessed to have them. But without them, and without teaching me that work ethic, and that, and my wife says this all the time: anything is possible. Everything is possible, and that was part of the lesson that my parents taught me as well. But you have to put a little hard work behind it.
Governor, your interest in government and the law, what sparked that interest? How did that come about?
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned, or it was mentioned during the introduction, that my mom was a legal secretary. And my first W-2 job was when I was 14 years old, and I was a busboy at the federal courthouse in the cafeteria. And so I'd obviously have to arrive at work before, and when I would take my breaks, I would sit in the courtrooms, and I would see and interact with the attorneys and all the people at the federal courthouse. And my mom, as a legal secretary, had worked for the U.S. Attorney, and she'd worked for the U.S. Public Defender. And I really saw some lessons there in really having an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. There were no professionals in our family. No one had graduated from college, and that was another thing that there was really a big push from my parents, is that you are going to go to college, and you are going to finish college and go on from there. But it was a big inspiration for me at that federal courthouse to be able to observe the lawyers, the staff, the judges, to watch people, that needed representation and who otherwise wouldn't have it, to find a profound respect for our Constitution and the laws of the United States of America and the rule of law, and that it protects everybody. It really made a big impression on a young man at the time.
Yeah. Thinking about the American dream, what was your dream?
I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. That was my. I assure you, and all the schools that I've visited, I tell those kids, it never occurred to me that I would have the privilege of serving as governor of the great state of Nevada. I thought that was so beyond anything that I would have a chance to do. But I did know that I wanted to make a difference, that I wanted to be in a position. When I was a kid, I loved doing reports on presidents. I loved American history and history from all over the country, and it really inspired me to do that. And then my first trip to Washington, D.C. was in 7th grade, and I had saved my lamb money to buy a plane ticket because my mom had a conference there, and that inspired me as well to go there. So I had hoped that someday that I would be able to make a position or make a difference and be in a position to make a positive change in people's lives.
Crossroads. I think all of us could point to a crossroad or two in our lives. Decisions that made all the difference in where we are today or where we're headed. Wondering if there's a crossroad or two that stand out in your life.
There are many, and I think all of us know that life is never in a straight line. Is never in a straight line. We have plans and life happens. And one of the crossroads for me is I think about the response to this question, and you talked about inspiration, but when I was in college at the University of Nevada, I became aware somebody I knew had done an internship in Washington, D.C. And I thought, wow, to be able to go to Washington, D.C. and work there, just think what you would learn. And I never thought I would get selected, but I thought, what do you have to lose? The worst they could do is say no. And that might be one of the lessons in today, is that you have to take risks, you have to be willing to take disappointment. But I applied to be an intern for Senator Paul Laxalt, which you had mentioned. And he was a very revered former governor of the great state of Nevada, a U.S. senator, best friend of President Ronald Reagan. He was called the first friend. They had been governors at the same time. And he was very well respected in the United States Senate. And so I decided to apply to be an intern for him. And I was selected. And the only reason I was selected, and I was actually telling my kids this the other day, and I probably shouldn't say this in the audience, it wasn't because of my grades, but it was because his father was a sheep herder. And he had read my personal statement, and I had put in there that I had raised sheep, and he said, we got to have this guy. And it's an absolute true story. And it changed my life. It changed my life. And a kid from Sparks, without any connections or anything like that, suddenly was thrust into, in 1984, in the re-election of Ronald Reagan, to be on Capitol Hill in the United States Senate. And I assure you, I was making copies and bringing coffee and doing whatever they asked me to do. But I got to observe, and I got to watch Senator Laxalt and how he conducted himself, and I got to watch some of the other U.S. senators and what they got to do on a day-to-day basis. And that was a crossroads for me to be selected for that. So I was telling somebody who was doing an application the other day, you just never know what it's going to be on your CV that somebody is going to notice, no matter how small that you think it is. But that really inspired me to get into public service, and Senator Paul Laxalt was somebody that I've tried to emulate my entire life.
Thank you. You were recently quoted as saying, there is a difference between wanting to do something and wanting to be something. What is the difference? Help us understand.
Well, that's something I have the privilege of almost every year speaking at Nevada Boys State and Nevada Girls State. And for those of you who don't know what that is there are young men and women who come to Carson City, and they come together and they learn about government. And I've watched this and observed this throughout my entire public career, because there's a really big difference between somebody who wants to be something. I want to be a governor. I want to be in an elected office, versus the question is why. The question is, what are you going to do? Not what are you going to be. And so that's something that, another thing I'm going to be doing is teaching at the law school in the fall, and the program's going to be called Law and Leadership. And part of that is what I call servant leadership, and there is literature on that. But there really is a very big difference, and you talked about it being campaign season, is seeing that the candidates who really want to do something and make a difference in people's lives, regardless of whether it's going to risk their office and their position. And so these young men and women, we'll probably get into some of the things, but that have happened in my elected career, or my public service career, but it's going to come to an end. Was a privilege to be in public service, and what I tell these young men and women who are coming up is it will not last forever, but what you will cherish and what you will value most is what you did, not who you were.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. As governor, you were willing to change your mind on public policy, important issues, be they driver authorization cards, better known as driver's licenses, taxes, gay marriage. Is there a leadership lesson there to be learned?
Well, there is. I mean, the first leadership lesson is to have an open mind. And that's something I learned as a federal judge. And I wasn't the most partisan guy to begin with. And when you go on the federal bench, all of that is out the door, obviously. And when you sit as a federal judge, everybody who comes through those doors has to understand, has to know that this is going to be a place where they're going to be treated fairly and the law is going to be applied fairly, regardless of who you are. And that was very instructive to me as governor, to take all the facts in and look at everything. Now, driver's privilege cards, driver's authorization cards, I was for those from day one.
Oh, I see.
But there was a lot of resistance to that in this state. And Mo Dennis's name was mentioned a little bit earlier. He was somebody came to me and sat down and said, it was his bill. It was his bill. And there was a lot of, I will say it, Republican opposition to those driver's authorization cards. But doing the due diligence, like I said, once you look at all the facts, it became a no-brainer. I mean, it really was a no-brainer. It has allowed for thousands of individuals to be able to drive legally and safely and ensure that they take the driver test, that their vehicles are insured. So that was a bill that I think has made a tremendous difference in our state. But you said, what's the lesson in the leadership is there are a lot of places that I know, and we could talk about that. Again, you have to have an open mind, and that's one of the things that I'm sure the senator gets frustrated sometimes, because you have to be able to work across the aisle. You have to be able to have a conversation with people to understand where they're coming from and why, and also not have the ego to admit that you might have been wrong. That you might have been wrong, and that maybe that individual did have a good point, and that whatever policy that they were promoting would make a big difference. So for me, I've always had an open mind, be it in the legislature, be it as Attorney General and as Governor. Obviously, there are some places where you don't agree, and you have to have the courage of your conviction, but you also have to have the courage to say that you were wrong or that you're willing to compromise because it is in the best interests of your constituency.
Thank you, Governor. A final question, somewhat related. You have a reputation for being an extraordinarily good listener. Has that always been the case?
That's the first time I've ever been asked that question. So I got to think back.
And how did you learn that importance?
Well, I think for me, being a good listener, again, is respect. You have to respect and look in the eye whoever you're talking to, whether you agree with them or not, whether you like them or not. So I think this is something that was instilled from my parents. And, as I think through, the different things that I've done, I can't think of a time when I wasn't willing to listen to somebody. You mentioned about the door always being open and having somebody come in, and even when they're angry at you, we can go in and we can take some audience questions as well. I still recall, 8 years ago, this state, we had over 14% unemployment. We led the country in bankruptcies. We led the country in foreclosures. We had the highest rate of uninsured in the country. We had the worst high school graduation rate in the country. And I came in and there were $8 billion of budget requests and we had $6 billion of money. So guess who had to be the guy, who had to make the cuts? And part of the response was, well, just raise taxes. But how do you raise taxes on a community where the business community is on its knees? And as I said, you had 175,000 people who had lost their jobs. So I had to make some really difficult decisions in terms of higher education, K through 12, health and human services, all the basic services. It broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart. But at the same time, we talked about economic development, the senator talked about that. We did have a plan, we did have a strategy to bring the state back. But in the meantime, difficult decisions. I still recall looking out from my office on the Capitol Mall, and there was a tent city on the Capitol, and they called it Sandoval. But I went out there, and there were a lot of angry students at me saying, Governor, you're cutting higher education. How could you do that? It's going to hurt us. It's going to cut programming. But I've always said, when you have somebody, you've got to sit down with them and explain where you're coming from. And part of the explanation is what I've just told you. But I told them, the state is going to come back. And when the state is in a position, we're going to restore all of this. And not only are we going to restore it, we're going to take it to the next level, which is, again, something you mentioned. So our economy did start to rebound. And we were in a position where I felt that we needed to make a generational investment in K through 12 education. But the only way to do that was to raise taxes. And for a Republican governor with Republican majorities in the state Senate and the Nevada Assembly, how do you think that went in the beginning? And in Nevada, for those of you who aren't from here, but most of these, you need 2/3 supermajority vote, which meant you had to get Republican votes in order to pass that tax. As governor, I visited over 300 schools here in Clark County, all the way to a little town called Austin, Nevada, that had 13 kids in their K through 8. 13. It's a town of a population of 200. And we've got to take care of everybody. And so, I just took it upon myself, and believe me, we had a board with the tally to get those commitments for those votes. And at the end of the day, we were able to get those votes to, frankly, the single largest tax increase in the history of this state to go directly invested into the children of Nevada.
Governor, and I think in a word, that's what I would call leadership. Please join me in thanking Governor Sandoval and congratulating him on the Eagle Leadership Award. Thank you.
It's really a pleasure to get to know you.
Thank you. Thank you.